streaming. Just give me a second to make sure that it's actually.
I see the streaming red blinky thing at the top.
Right, so Twitch is going. Facebook is not doing anything. And YouTube is going.
Cool.
And I don't know how I check Instagram.
Instagram.com / whatever we're called, Filmocracy.
I don't know. I don't know if this is. I have to use some like third-party tool.
Oh, I gotcha.
For Instagram to work, but
my Filmocracy says we're live.
Oh, it does?
Yeah. Let me see what happens if I click on it, though. What do I get? I can't really tell if I'm getting. I don't know if I'm getting anything.
Sweet.
Right. I can't see anything, and I'm on this podcast. Yuck.
Oh my god, I don't know why Facebook is. Anyway, all right.
Meta. That is why all things have gone to hit the fan.
Here we go.
Officially.
All right. Welcome to another fancy week of the Filmocracy podcast. Again, we're joined by John Fitzgerald, CEO of iGems, and Justin Giddings, some guy we found on the corner of the street. So hopefully he has something to contribute. But I know that we have a lot of stuff to talk about, particularly about the Oscars. And I know John is especially eager to talk about it. So I'll let him take it away from the beginning.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Paul. Hi, Justin.
Hi. I'm so glad to be here. You guys seem nice.
We're good guys. Thanks for joining. Yeah. So I was thinking, because the Oscars were announced, the nominations were announced last week, it might be fun to talk a little bit about it, because even though, yes, there are a lot of us that don't really care about awards, right? Some people think it's not about awards, it's about art. But the fact is, we live in the festival world, and our mission is to support independent filmmakers, and we live in the film festival space here. And I think connecting film festivals and Oscars is important, because I think it can expand audiences for independent movies. I think that it has over the years. And I think, it's important to kind of call out the fact that all the pros and cons about, the Netflixes and Hulus and the streaming, and Warner Brothers going day and date. There's all this drama around what it's doing to the theatrical marketplace. I think when you get right down to it, we want to support independent film, and we want these movies to be seen. And I think it's really exciting when you see that, 4 of the Best Picture nominees are essentially films that came out of the festival world. A couple of them were, films that didn't necessarily need the festival world, but certainly, Drive My Car and Coda were discovered on the festival circuit. And I just thought it would be a fun place to start. We could talk a little bit about Best Picture. We could talk a little bit about international, of course, documentary, and then shorts. So where do you guys feel like diving in? What do you want to give some feedback first before I dive in?
Well, I think there's a lot of interesting things happening internationally. I think Parasite was sort of we've had successful international films before, but I really think even you can see on Netflix that there's more and more international content just like poking up at the top of their top 10 list. So it's pretty exciting for me as a Korean person, because Korea has a lot of interesting high concept films and TV series that are now getting a lot of exposure. But yeah, there's some great stuff that's been produced internationally that people never hear about. Like even Drive My Car, I'm so thankful that it's like getting this big push because I wouldn't have heard about it otherwise.
Yeah, same here. And you do bring up a good point, Paul, about how the streaming revolution, if you will, has brought international content to the forefront. Like I thought about Dark, the German television series that did really, really well on Netflix, and I loved it and I watched all of it. And I've always been like I grew up watching anime, and so I'm subtitles, foreign films, never been a barrier for me. But you'd have to go out and search for it and seek it out. And so now things like Squid Game, being so incredibly popular, and it feels integrated. Like the conversation is becoming, Parasite happened and it was like, oh my goodness, that's so crazy. We didn't see that one coming. And then of course you had a large chunk of people, particularly in this country, that were like, what? That shouldn't have won Best Picture because it isn't American. I mean, the British, they can win Best Picture, but you know what we mean, right? And now it's just like, top 10 on Netflix is shows that are just would not have even had a chance to be seen in America in any capacity, probably 5 years ago.
Yeah, well, it's incredible. You mentioned, Paul, the Parasite. In 94 years, only 12 foreign films have been nominated for Best Picture. That's crazy time, right? And Parasite's the only winner. And that film, just to connect back to festivals, premiered in Cannes, where it won the Palme d'Or, played Telluride. But this year, right, we've got Jane Campion, who won the Palme d'Or in '93 with the piano. I think this is correct if I'm wrong here, guys, but I think it got more nominations than anything else. And The Power of the Dog, her new film, kicked off its run at Venice, then played Telluride, then Toronto, and New York, and 27 other festivals. So another great example of what a festival can do for a film that is now, considered by many to be the front runner for Best Picture.
Yeah, it's interesting, John, we were talking about it beforehand too, even of just like that festival relationship with not only with Oscars, but just like what is a festival. Do you have any insight into like the specific paths that any of these festival films took that might have led them to the Oscars?
Well, I think there's two different camps is kind of how I see it. And again, the Jane Campion situation with Power of the Dog kicked off its run at Venice. So that's where it was premiered. And it did that fall thing, right? It went to Telluride, Toronto, New York. So it had a very specific run, played all those festivals where you can have your press junkets and essentially generate buzz for this prestige picture. And then you look at something like Drive My Car, and this was a much smaller movie, but it premiered in Cannes. But then, of course, it played TIFF and did New York and a lot of the other. So once they saw what they had, they kind of continued that run, and then it went on to get these 4 nominations. And I think the fact that movie, Drive My Car, a 3-hour international movie, was nominated for Best Picture and Best Director, by the way, which is no small feat, is really important. But in addition to that, you look at something like Coda, right? Coda had its premiere at Sundance, won the Audience Award, Grand Jury Prize, Directing Prize, and then Apple plunks down $25 million, knowing that they were going to be pushing this movie for Best Picture nomination, which of course it got. So Those are 3 very different stories and leverage the festival circuit in very different ways.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder too if like in Apple's mind, it was like, let's buy this property knowing that it won't be until, wait. So because Coda, did they buy that this year? Was that a purchase this year
They bought it at the Sundance Film Festival. The year
I
before.
thought it had come out last year, but I guess not.
No, it was last year's. But
so last year,
again, we're
so
talking,
just to get my timeline right, Apple bought it at last year's Sundance Film Festival
correct.
in January, in the attempt to possibly with the understanding that they were going to push it for festival season, for Oscars, a year and like 5 quarters later, basically. Which I just find interesting that they would be making that kind of gamble, if you will, sort of early on, right? Acquire a title that we're not going to really be able to push for a big award for a year, but know that we're going to push for a big award. Are you following me at all, or am I just speaking?
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and it is a gamble, but I think in Apple's case, it had a pretty calculated risk. I mean, that was a movie that a lot of people were a lot of companies rather were angling to buy. And it's a rare thing for a film to win the audience award and the grand jury prize. So they knew what they were getting into, and they just frankly ponied up more than anybody was willing to spend. And they knew that they had to, because it was a fairly new service and they wanted to compete with Netflix and Amazon. And they knew that they had an Oscar candidate on their hands for sure. And they also knew that they had 10, 11 months to play it out, right?
Yeah.
Because they didn't have to do their theatrical till later in the year. You know what I mean? Like, it's a different game than a studio knowing that they're releasing a movie in the fall, which is typically when all the prestige pictures are released, right? Knowing that they could play Toronto and Telluride and some of these other festivals in the fall and generate some buzz, that's a different strategy. They've already got the release date set.
Yeah.
That's a different game than what Apple played.
Yeah.
Did we lose Paul?
We might have. I mean, we can talk about him, especially if we're streaming live. Oh, shoot.
What I missed?
He's always doing 17 things at once, so you just never know.
Yeah, he's talented like that.
He's got a clone sitting right next to him.
Yeah. Although your brother and you, I think, look a lot alike.
Wow. We're two different people, Justin.
Oh my God. Yeah, please go there. Let's do that. Jeez Louise.
I'm not my sibling. I am me.
You're
Sorry, where were you talking before I left so rudely?
We're just talking about the difference between a film that is geared up for their fall release by a studio, knowing that it's their prestige picture gunning for Oscars, versus a film that, like Coda, that was acquired earlier in the season, didn't even have a release date yet, much less a distributor. And it became essentially a streamer that bought it, that had to manufacture this campaign. And they spent a ton of money, and it's all paying off.
Yeah, right. So I don't think we can look at anything that Apple does and think that it's a strategy, because they're so new at this. Like, their streaming platform is still so young, and they don't have that much stuff, and they don't have that much experience, and they're trying to steal talent from other companies. But at the end of the day, like, you're still not one of the big players in film. So I think they just saw an opening, and they needed some prestige titles. Kind of like when Netflix and Amazon first burst onto the scene. They were just overpaying for all this stuff because they needed content and they needed press. And so Apple kind of did the same thing, just like 8 years later.
Yeah, wasn't Coda one of the biggest, if not the biggest, acquisition out of Sundance? Yeah, you've bought yourself a headline. Oh, hey, we're legitimate film people. Just become the number one or the first ever or highest ever person kind of headline, and now you get to, and then combine that with Jason Sudeikis' show, and it's like, oh, we might have an audience. But yeah, I think you might be right that it was just like, we have money, watch us use it. It just drops some major cash. It's interesting to me though too, because like, with the company with Apple, streamers in general, even just like there isn't a box office. Like, they don't need to go make $25 million on this film for them to have come out ahead. because of course, the fact with Apple's case that it's more than just and Amazon, more than just their library. But it is about buying prestige. Like they're buying a laurel almost, if you will, which to awkwardly tie it back into film festivals, sometimes that's the goal, is like drop some cash so that we can just get laurels pasted onto our poster. I don't know, John, did I set you up for an interesting comment, or have I let us down?
No, I think everything you're saying makes sense. I think the whole idea here is that film festivals can serve a lot of different needs, but at the end of the day, I think that the message is film festivals are an opportunity to not only support and generate buzz for really amazing films, but they're also a place of discovery, and where you can find films like Flea that we're going to talk about in a second, and Coda, and a lot of these other international movies that frankly would have gone undiscovered if you had just plunked Drive My Car into a few theaters without having the buzz to help kind of tell people what they're about to see and what's going on. I mean, it's not a slam dunk by any stretch, but coming out of winning major awards and getting all these critics prizes, I think helps to get people excited to see it. And it's still in theaters. You can't even see it online.
Yeah.
You can't even go and stream it now. They're playing that out, and I think that's interesting too.
I think it's supposed to come on HBO Max after theaters.
Yeah, early March.
Mm-hmm.
He says as if he knew that information, but he just looked it up on Wikipedia about 2 minutes ago.
Did I look like I was typing? This is how I look when I'm typing.
I'm typing. Yeah. Yes, you did.
So how about if we shift gears for a second over to documentary, because I think that's an interesting section, and clearly the last few years documentary has become all the rage at a lot of film festivals, and Netflix has certainly helped expand audiences for documentary, which we love. But Flea did something kind of amazing, and this is a participant movie, which kind of should be said, I guess, because they're the leader in that space. But Flea was nominated for Best Documentary Feature, Best Animated Feature, and Best International Feature. Never been done. And this is a film that won the Grand Jury Prize in the World Cinema section, the World Cinema Documentary section at Sundance, and then did Telluride, TIFF, and New York. So this is an interesting movie, I think, to anchor that documentary section. And it's unfortunately competing against Drive My Car in Best International category, so that's a tough one. But yeah, it's pretty amazing, and you can see this now. This one's on Hulu.
Oh, good. I was just going to ask if it was. I'm getting myself a little list of movies to watch. That's what I'm doing.
Another one that's worth watching is Summer of Soul, which won the Sundance Audience and Jury Prizes in the U.S. Docs section. And that movie's available to see now too. Unfortunately, Riding with Fire is not available till March 28th, but that too was in Sundance in the World Cinema section, winning the audience award in that section. So amazing movies. Attica premiered at TIFF, played a few others. Ascension premiered at Tribeca. So all these movies played big film festivals.
Yeah, that last week's convo too of just like what does a festival do? It does playing. I'm interested in like what is the alternative? Are there films that have won, particularly maybe recently, that didn't need the accolades or sort of the artistic stamp of approval that comes from premiering or screening it like a TIFF or something like that?
Well, I think it's an interesting debate if you talk about the value of a festival and its box office returns, right? Because sometimes you see big commercial fare play, in Cannes and Berlin, and I mean Cannes showed The Wizard of Oz, and showed Star Wars. I mean it's showed big movies, or not. Maybe it's not Star Wars, but one of the later editions of the Star Wars franchise. But I think that's a different game. and it's also playing something in a big international marketplace that's all about kind of fanfare and creating spectacle. That's a different scenario than saying, so these movies that play these festivals that win awards also go on and win Oscars. And if they don't win these awards, then they're probably not going to get Oscars, because I see those as almost two totally different buckets. And I think the truth is, to be nominated by Oscars, it's essentially achieving critical acclaim. And if it's an independent film, especially achieving any critical acclaim, chances are it's going to have played film festivals. That's just the nature of the business.
Right. There is some interesting short stuff, which we don't have to get into right this second, but when we do, I just recently had a convo with with an Academy voter about shorts, who gave me a lot of like insider info that I find really, really interesting. But yeah, no, that makes sense. Just the natural.
Yeah, and I do think we should spend some time on shorts, because again, part of what we do is try and help filmmakers advance their careers. And I think when you talk about advancing your careers, and for a lot of filmmakers, it starts with making shorts. There are a number of Oscar qualifying film festivals that I know you're going to talk about in a minute. But before we jump into the shorts category, I just want to throw out a couple quick thoughts on the international category, because this is another really interesting place for what I would call kind of independent, critically acclaimed films that come out of the film festival circuit. And again, Drive My Car, Flee, The Hand of God, played Venice and Telluride, Lunana, The Worst Person in the World. These are movies that all played, all did very well, and are going to generate more attention because of the Oscars. Because a lot of the general consumers out there that like to watch movies don't necessarily frequent film festivals. That's a whole other podcast, I guess.
Yeah.
But the fact that it is one of the most popular shows of the year, seen by, I think there's only a few shows that are seen more, the Super Bowl and maybe one or two others. If you do get attention with the Oscars, there's an Oscar bump, they call it, right? Where the movie can generate bigger audience, can make more money. And everybody's loving this film from Norway, The Worst Person in the World. And again, you can't see it yet, can't stream it yet. But I think that these movies are going to get a big bump. And I think it's, to your point earlier, Justin, it's expanding the audiences for international movies and international films, that people are watching these things on Netflix now that 2 or 3 years ago, that audience wasn't discovering a subtitled movie.
Yeah. 100%.
Well, shameless plug. We did have Worst Person in the World on Filmocracy through one of our festivals. So you could have watched that movie months ago.
With Filmocracy, filmocracy.com. Make it so. Oh, yeah. Wait, hold on. Let me go.
I'm clapping really loud for that, because that is one of the coolest things about Filmocracy that is. Did you do that, Justin?
I did.
Wow. I wasn't sure if it was just your kids that you were like.
No, we're sedating their brains with television.
Ready? Now.
Go. They do nothing on command, though, by the way.
No, but I want to finish with my own shameless plug, which isn't really a plug because I don't really get credit anymore because it was so damn long ago. But something I found really interesting, I've told you this story, Justin, that when I decided to show Life is Beautiful as the opening night movie at AFI, it was a calculated risk by me. I'd already seen it at a major festival. I knew it was going to do well, but the AFI had never opened their festival with a foreign film. They thought I was nuts. And man's Chinese, 1,500 seats, red carpet, advisory board. I mean, big deal for the AFI.
Yeah.
And that movie was gonna get Oscar nominations, right? It was kind of a sure thing. We all thought anyway. And it was in October, so it was before the nominations. But we knew it was going to do well. We knew Benini would get nominated. We knew it would get international. We didn't know it was going to get Best Picture nomination, which it did. But the coolest thing for me was coming out of that theater and seeing just the awe on everybody's face and the response and the reaction to that film.
Yeah.
And Benigni was there, right? So, you know, he made a spectacle of himself, which he's really good at. But the fact that people came to that movie because they wanted to be part of the opening night at AFI that hadn't really seen foreign films.
Mm.
And they came out of that thinking, wow, that was amazing. And hey, it's not that bad to read some subtitles.
Yeah.
So some people from that movie now were open to seeing more movies like it. And I think that's kind of what's a cool thing about film festivals and what Netflix and Amazon and Hulu and some of these platforms are doing. HBO, they're opening it up to the general consumer, and these movies are crossing over. And I think it's incredible.
Yeah. It's I wouldn't say it's a meritocracy at all, but there's like an algorithmic meritocracy component in that if a lot of people are liking it and watching it, meritocracy component in that if a lot of people are liking it and watching it, then it will become a thing, and then it will climb the charts and continue to be seen by more and more and more and more people. And yeah, I find it just kind of great that I even checked Netflix's top 10 while we were talking, and there were like 2 projects that were, you know, foreign projects, foreign films, international films, television shows.
I do have a theory about this though, that like we all go to work, we work our day, and then the workday ends and we go and we sit on our couch and we pull up whatever we're gonna watch. And the second screen phenomenon of like you're watching something and you're not really watching it and you're also on your phone. And you can't really do that when you're watching something with subtitles. And this is something that Kasha and I actually deal with, where we're like, what should we watch? This movie is really good. Let's say, Drive My Car. And then she's like, but does it have subtitles? And then I'm like, well, yeah, it's a Japanese movie. And then she says, well, I wanted to like do this game on my phone while I watch. And you can't do that while you're like constantly trying to read the subtitles. So then we end up picking something that's like way worse in quality, questionable quality, just because you don't have to like pay that close attention to it. So this is like Survivor or something, like something where you can like easily keep up with the story without watching, and then when you hear something important happen, you can look up and catch up. And I think this is I don't know, it's almost like a category for us. Like, do you want to watch something good where you have to focus, or do you just want like to kind of watch something that's decent enough that you don't have to focus on?
I do that with poorly rated comedies that like came out, I think maybe, but no one really knew because it happened so fast that they were in a theater and then it was out. I'll do the double screen thing, but it is interesting because you're not, I mean, like statistically, that's a thing that so many people are consuming content at home with a second screen going in some capacity. I don't know. I wonder in some ways if that isn't then even more impressive that there is such an international influx, because it would be fighting against just like viewing habits of the American public. And if that wasn't there, would we see more? If there wasn't that second screen phenomenon, would we really have then a huge influx of subtitled content? Because our focus isn't split. I don't know.
Wow.
There's no way to split test it. I'm sure in the multiverse, somebody somewhere hasn't invented smartphones, but we have Netflix. We'll never know. There's no way to contact them.
There's 2 arguments here. One is like, whenever we watch something and we don't use our phone and we don't even realize that we're not using our phone, at the end of it, we're like, wow, that was really good. I didn't look at my phone at all. And that's like some sort of edge. Like,
Yeah.
it was so good that I didn't even like think about, like, I was so immersed, right? But then the other argument could be like, oh, if it's like a subtitled movie, I'm forced to pay more attention and then forced to get more invested, as opposed to like using my second screen to watch something. So
I'm picking up what you laying down.
Yeah, cuts both ways.
Yeah.
So Justin, let's move over to the short side of the world and talk about the connection of festivals and shorts and Oscars and careers and all that kind of fun stuff.
It's a real interesting connection because there's basically two ways to qualify for the Oscars in the shorts category. Actually, I guess it's pretty much all categories. It's just it's odd for shorts because you either win a festival laurel, the award at the qualifying festival. And the Academy, Oscars.org, has a rules and eligibility, and they have a PDF that lists every single festival that is eligible for shorts. And there's like 40 or 50 all around the world. And so, if you do the math on it, I'm sure, I've got it pulled up here in front of me, but they're not numbered. Like I said, maybe 10, 15 a page, and there's like 13 pages. So, there's a lot. Winning those festivals, there's only so many awards at each of those festivals. So there's like a limited number of options there. And then the other way that you're able to get nominated or to be eligible to be nominated is a theatrical run. Well, for most of these features, that's totally doable, and it's through the festivals and it's through distribution and sometimes maybe forewalling sometimes. But that's not really happening with shorts. So what ends up happening is that the eligibility pool is so much smaller for shorts in the Oscar space that there is a whole pathway to becoming eligible that a short filmmaker can actually do on their own. The short version, pun intended, of that is basically forewalling. You rent out a theater and you put it up for a certain amount of time, and then you fulfill all the technical requirements, and boom, you're officially able to submit your eligibility. And there's quite a few. What was the?
Doesn't Shorts International do a qualifying run? I think they're coming out theatrically.
Shorts TV does that as well. And then there was what was the period documentary? It's like I saw it on Netflix before I even, but basically I think it had won the doc short like a year or two ago. And one of the people connected with that project, who's also now an Academy voter, kind of gave me this weird behind the scenes of the shorts thing, because I've got this short script that I've been talking about, Peregrine, and it had won Slam Dance. And so I reached out to this guy and I was basically like, hey, is this a play we can really go for? Like, should I be budgeting the forewalling into this? And he reads it and he's like, I think it's going to win all the fests and not be nominated at all for an Oscar. And I was like, oh, what's it? Fucking break that down for me. And he brought up a couple of interesting things. The first one is just that the Oscars tend to get thematically focused and or thematically bored, in that they'll be really into something and then they're not going to be into that again. And he was like, a few years ago, dealing with an elderly parent was a thing, and they had a bunch of those and they watched a bunch of those. And so my script
or kids, right? Kids.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. There's exactly. And so he was just like, so your timing is off in that sense. But then another thing that he said that was real interesting was that Oscars tend to have longer shorts that get nominated and win. And whereas festivals are the exact opposite. They like the shorter shorts that are easily programmable. And he was like, I'm sitting there, I'm having conversations and talking to these voters and about why. And they're like, for us, the concept is, this is the ultimate achievement this year in both the technical and artistic sides of filmmaking, right? The motion picture, arts and sciences, right? And so if you can do something in 6 or 7 minutes, it's like, okay, can you really, if you can do something in 6 or 7 minutes, that's great. But can you do it for 20 minutes? Then it's impressive kind of idea, right? So I thought that was really interesting, because then his take was, I think this is going to be a festival darling and won't get nominated. the subject matter is somewhat in their world from a few years ago. There's not diversity or a social issue in it. I mean, we've got some diverse casting, but it's not built around that in any way. Yeah, the length being a huge factor in a lot of Academy voters' opinions. And so, yeah, I just thought that'd be an interesting kind of insight to the shorts land. At the same time, the fact that you have control and can put yourself on a short list of 200 films that are just purely eligible in the first place means that you have a higher statistical chance of being nominated for an Oscar than you would have getting into almost any festival. Just, number of submissions versus number of acceptances is actually much, much higher if you check the boxes for short, which you can control for yourself. So I thought that was really interesting and a real interesting takeaway. But of course, know your film.
Right. Speaking of shorts and what you do after that, can you just touch real quickly on the idea of advancing your career through playing some of these Oscar qualifying festivals and how short filmmakers can leverage that? Because they all want to get meetings, right? They all want to get their next project made.
Yeah. Kind of there's the sort of broad obvious thing, which is like play and win a lot of festivals and get a lot of laurels, and that makes you look good. But like specific strategy wise, it can kind of go in a lot of different directions. And as we talk about with Film Festival Mastery, it's going to come back to your goals. It's going to come back to what exactly are the projects that you're trying to make. Are you wanting to write and direct your own thing? So all of that can kind of play into that. But, the quickest way to convince somebody to give you money for a feature film or for a studio, for you to get hired to direct a feature, is to have a good short that shows one's voice and creative vision. And so for me, I have an artistic love for shorts and the artistry of what they do. But for me, career-wise, I'm always thinking, how does the actual production or story or some combination of the two elevate my status as a filmmaker, elevate the perception of my abilities, elevate my status as a filmmaker, elevate the perception of my abilities and all that. Just yet, I guess. Again, not full details yet, but like currently hired for my first feature, and it's from a producer who worked with me on some early shorts, and she's just been looking for a script that is a good match, and then found one, and we liked it, and it's like, great, now we're doing some work on it, and money's in a bank account, like it's ready to go as soon as the script is gone through development and we put the budget, and like I might be shooting in fall. So that's how a short helps you. Is there's the networking, there's the getting into the festivals and laurels, there's the pushing yourself to grow creatively, and then when the right time happens, you've got the portfolio, if you will, to prove your mettle.
Awesome, good stuff. All right, Paul, what are your final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Final thoughts. It sounds to me like Justin Giddings is an actual filmmaker. That's what I'm starting to learn.
What's funny? My business partner in decision maker meetings, we realized that like she had never seen any of my films, none of it. We hit the ground running with launching the venture and never had the creative conversation. So just this weekend she watched them. She's like, a creative conversation. So just this weekend she watched them. She's like, oh my gosh, this is really good. I understand so much more about you now.